beautiful people. I'm pre-recording this because I'm already sick of the Canadian cold and decided to fly into Florida. But stupid me, I didn't realize that November 5th is kind of a big deal to be flying into the US. So I guess we'll see what happens. But nonetheless, I wanted to talk about something that I think is really important and how we've gotten worse at doing layoffs. Let's face it, layoffs suck. And I think we've all seen those headlines about really poorly handled layoffs. I think a lot of us can remember better.com last year or all the stories of employees being locked out before they even know they've been let go. So imagine you're trying to log into your computer, you're locked out or you're driving to your office, go use your key card. It doesn't work. Like, talk about pretty bad punch in the gut for something that is a major life change. So we have seen a lot of layoffs this year, and we've seen some companies do it okay. And then we have seen some companies not doing it as well. I think it's time that we go back to compassion. Like I remember in my earlier career, anytime that any staff would be laid off, it didn't matter the amount of folks that were being laid off. They all got a one-on-one. And at least I know there's not a lot that hiring managers can share, but having that one-on-one conversation, even if it's 3 to 5 minutes, it does a lot for the employees because you got to think they have to go and explain to their wife, their husband, anyone else in their family that, oh, by the way, I don't have a job anymore. Last week at Talent Connect, there was a lot of companies sharing like what does compassionate layoffs look like? And the formula is not that hard. I think you have to look at each and every employee and their individual case, but you have to treat everyone fairly. I don't know if this is since the pandemic that we're laying off people in groups. Like, that's gotta stop, right? Like, even if it's 2,000 people, I know there's timing, there's things you need to execute before a particular time, but have some decency and schedule this right and show some empathy to those employees that their lives just change. So I think let's focus on how we say goodbye because it's similar as we're onboarding an employee, the offboarding of the employees as important. Make sure they have a good feeling about you because they might be the person that's referring the next candidate that you need to hire in the future. It might be your next customer. If I work for your company and I got laid off in a mass group, my feelings are not going to be great. Will I ever buy your product? Probably never. Will I recommend someone to buy your product? Probably never. So let's get back to being people because the decisions we're making, I know, are not based on that actual person's personality or what they've done. It's just sometimes it needs to happen in corporate. Let's just show a little bit of empathy. So on that note, let's get back to Danielle, Adam, and Joel. Back to the panel.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a victim of a mass layoff back in my time. It was right before the holiday, and it was awful.
Better.com?
And no, this is about 12 years ago, and I remember getting laid off right before the holiday, and obviously layoff sucks, and we knew it was coming. There was some big losses in the agency, and people were going to get let go, and it was tough right before the holiday. There was a lot of folks that said, shit, like, nothing's happening right now in the market. It's a terrible time. It's a time people want to be with their families. And why couldn't they wait till after the new year? Why? Why couldn't they? Now, Serge brought up something interesting too. Mass layoffs, listen, they happen. And it'd be great if every company could have one-on-ones with everybody, but that's not its scale. It's not possible. But there has to be a better way. What do you guys think?
My personal thought is it's hard for me to believe that a structure of management is that big to where you wouldn't be able to do one-on-ones. Like, I'm not saying the CEO has to do the one-on-one, but like a manager, unless you're managing hundreds of people, but that's not every company. So I think you just got to look at it, and I think the general rule should be, would I want this to happen to me this way? And if you're like, no, then do something about it. And it's worth investing the time because otherwise I think you get bad publicity. You will get absolutely shredded on social, like better.com. That guy actually had to go into hiding.
Really?
Yeah, it was 2 or 3 years ago now, but he had to go
Death
into
threat.
hiding because he got it so bad, which I'm like, dude, you did an online Zoom layoff. Like, it was very heartless. So I just look at it like, is there a way that I could do it to where we know it's gonna suck. It's
Mm.
gonna be like polishing a turd. It's still gonna be a turd. But is this the way that I would want this to happen to me? Yes or no? And if it's like no, then you gotta put a little bit of effort into it at least.
Yeah, how a candidate feels on the way out is sometimes a lot more important than they feel on the way in, right?
I
You know, how do
100% agree with that. Yeah. And as someone who also was on the receiving end of a layoff, I would say that I just wish there was more education around like, what do you do after you get laid off? And for that reason, I created like, I remember like last year, I created a like a little slider thing about like, here's what I did right after my layoff, like how to emotionally handle a layoff because it's a lot. It's
it's a lot.
really it's a
Yeah.
lot. It's emotional. It's, it's psychological. It's like, oh, what did I do wrong? You don't necessarily get an answer for that. It's also, financially. I mean, it's like so many things at once. And I think if companies were able to provide, not just a severance package, but within that severance package, that is probably hopefully like guaranteed, which it wasn't for me. I had to fight for mine. So,
Really?
I think yeah, and at the same time it's like maybe providing some sort of like mental health support, like, oh, like your medical insurance will extend until, a much later date until you get your next job. Like just something that helps to bridge that
But we all know
gap.
that's not gonna happen. This is a mod. I didn't mean to
I
cut you
know.
off there. You know what? I mean, let's be real about it. It always comes down to the bottom line, and that's BS. The companies that really care, it happens, and I agree with you, Danielle. And it comes down to offboarding, right? And I remember my time ended at American Express, they did a great job with it. It was actually a choice why I left, but they had a great offboarding process, and they set us up with career coaches, and that's where I learned how to do the elevator pitch, and they extended benefits, and they did all that.
Yeah.
But a company has to be willing to do that and also have the financial ability and resources to do that. There's nothing worse when a company just kicks you out on the street with nothing.
I
Nothing.
just I just feel like if you're laying people off to that degree and the CEO is making, 100x what the lowest paid person is making, that CEO should take at least a 10% pay cut for that year,
Of course.
given that they navigated their company to the point where they have to do a mass layoff, and they should reinvest that money into the resources for employees
Preach.
that they're laying off.
Yeah, the
Preach.
challenge though is all right. It's because
It's not gonna happen.
most of the pay is tied into like the stock price, and the inevitability is once you lay people off, the stock price goes
Yeah.
up. So it's almost like I just did a post about this. Like CEOs are literally incentivized to lay people off because the stock price goes up every time, and if most of that pay is tied into the stock price, they might even go, yeah, I'll take less for a salary. I take a 4% pay cut. Yeah, but the stock just went up 20%. I think it happened to I think it's Microsoft CEO. They laid off a bunch of people this year, and the overall pay went up by 64%. But it's
Wow.
not really the salary that's gone up. It's just it's the stock
Stock
Yeah.
options.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, there's also no regulation here, and like I've talked to a lot of friends too who console me, and like the back of napkin rule of thumb, whatever the hell you want to call it, is 2 weeks of severance for every year working there. I've seen that both ways. I've seen garbage where people have been there for 10 years and they get 2 weeks, and then I've seen it pay out pretty well too. It's company to company, but there's no regulation around it. And I think that's one thing that we maybe should be looking at here.
I also think like
At will employment.
well,
It
we were
is
just
that
talking about
well.
that with like the employer brand, right? Like with John and Jocelyn, where it's like I just think honestly companies need to realize people have lost trust in the fact that companies really like actually care about you. And I think it's just like we all need to collectively move on and be like, look, if it is at will, like it could be just a bad layoff, but it's just these messages in the front end when they're hiring people of like, oh, we just love all our employees, we treat you like family. It's like that just loses steam then when people all these Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they see their parents getting laid off or they've seen layoffs and layoffs. They're not going to believe that stuff. And I think at some point it's just going to have to shift. It's going to be like, yeah, actually, this is a job, and if you get laid off, don't put too much weight and stability, or don't put all of your like hope in a company. Essentially, like it shouldn't be your whole identity either.
It shouldn't. It definitely should not. I mean, we could talk about this for a long time, but nothing's going to change, right? Nothing's going to change companies revolt. But that's why we're seeing such a big shift in people going out to work for themselves. And I say this all
Fractional.
the time. No, no, or
Yeah.
fractional. Like no one, right. I've been working myself for almost 8 years now. No one's ever going to fire me. I mean, I
No,
could
and
lose a
it, and
client, but
it,
no one's
that
going to fire me. I'm never going to get fired again.
and that's hard, right? I mean, like working for yourself is a whole different challenge.
It's
I'm
a
not saying that's
whole different beast. It's
necessarily
not for
right for
everybody.
everybody, But I do genuinely think
Unless you
there
have
are
a
a
course
lot
or
of
something.
options to actually generate some income on the side. So we were talking about the side hustle thing as kind of a joke before this. I think it's smart to look and assess your skills and go, is there some way I
Agree.
can make some additional income? That way, if you get laid off, at least you have something you could dive into a little bit more to kind of help you until you get
You already
another
got
full
something
time job.
started, right? Like something could be something you're passionate about, something that you're more than a hobby, right? But something you could
Consulting.
actually really capitalize on that you could leverage for stability and income.
We could definitely say that. And I think at the end of the day, there's two types of people. There's people that like to be told what to do and go work for a company and come home and play Xbox and order in food and like live
Why are
their
you
life.
describing my life right now?
Yeah,
And
definitely
there's
not.
people who come home like who like own their own businesses, or they work at a company and they come home and they continue to do work and they do their side hustle, and they just they're hustlers. Like I think there just are two different types of people, maybe probably more than that. But at the same time, like, yeah, there is, in my opinion, in our opinions, we all have them. There's a better way to do things. Diversifying your income, creating multiple income streams, that
There's a
is the
course
way
on
forward.
LinkedIn for 149. Justin Welsh will teach you how to do that.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, Josh just said nobody protects you but yourself. You can drink the Kool-Aid, which I think, honestly, I think people
No.
just pretend to even drink the Kool-Aid most of the time. You know, like they kind of pretend just to play along with it, but always have a backup plan. And I think whether that backup plan is an actual business or we talk about it all the time, like relationships and network. Like relationships are huge, right? Like, do you have
Huge.
relationships if you built strategically? So, Josh, great
Your
point, man.
network is your net worth.
I agree with that. I mean, some people have been tossing that one out the window. I mean, I'm a prime example of the value of my network. My entire success in my relationship is predicated on the relationships,
With me.
amongst others, right? Like it just
Solely.
it's
Solely, Joel.
exclusively. I owe everything to everything to Joel there. All right, let's keep the show rolling.